So in this lesson, we're going to talk about Adobe Media Encoder, which you probably have if you have After Effects on your computer. If you don't have it installed, I do love it, and it's a very powerful program. So how do you use Adobe Media Encoder to render? It's really simple. All you do is go into your composition that you want to render, or same up in here, project window, and go to composition, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue, and down here, same thing, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. We'll click that, and what happens is Media Encoder automatically launches. If it's not already open, it will take a few seconds or a minute and launch itself, and there it is. So once Media Encoder is open, we have a lot of presets to choose from here. So the first one here, we've got the QuickTime, we've got H.264, MPEG-4, TIFF, a lot of different things, animated GIFs, HEVC, which I'm a huge fan of right now. So from here, we can pick a preset, and that preset can then be changed even further by going into here and changing different settings within it. So this preset is match source high bit rate. There's all these presets just for H.264 by itself. If I want to go ahead and change the wrapper to QuickTime, here's my preset for that. It pulls in presets that I've already created for a Media Encoder, as well as ones that are preset within the program. So for this one, I may pick ProRes 422 HQ, and I can click that, and I can see here an example of my render, and it shows me how it's going to look here. And I can also adjust in and out points here if I want to do that. I can scale the size to fit in the window. I can make it 100%, whatever I need it to be at. Scale to fit, stretch to fill, all those good things. Over here, we can select things like export video, export audio. If we don't want audio on this because there's no audio attached, I can turn that off here. I'll put the name here. I tell it where to save the file here. Going down into inside of the presets, this is where I can also pick different codecs. If I want to pick different codecs, I can scroll down within this. I can match the source of the quality. I can change it here if I need to. I can change the size here if I need to. I just have to uncheck this box. I can keep it constrained, or I can put in custom sizes here if needed. I can uncheck this. I can change the frame rate here. Everything is check marked as kind of like a precaution so that you don't go in and start changing things. You can change the bit depth here. You can render at maximum depth here. Advanced settings, I hardly ever use. Bitrate settings, I'm not going to mess with too much. Again, use maximum render quality. And you can also put metadata into this as well, which if you're into metadata, that's very powerful stuff. We also have things like effects, where you can apply Lumetri, LUT effects, name overlays, things that I rarely ever use. You may use them. Audio, this is turned off. There's nothing here because I've turned it off up here. So if I enable this, boom, there's all the audio abilities, things that I can change, customize. You can change the sample rate. You can change the sample size. The audio codec here says uncompressed because we are using a higher format ProRes file. So if we were to change this to something like H.264, now inside of our audio, you can see I can change from AAC to MPEG-4. I can change the different codecs, things like that, change the quality, change the bit rate, all that good stuff. So a lot of customization can happen here in a Media Encoder that is much more challenging to do inside of After Effects, or not even possible at all. It just depends. Now, I will tell you, actually, before I finish this out, multiplexer, captions if you're using captions, and then publish. This is a really cool option if you want to use this, where you can actually click on something like your Facebook account and you can log in and it'll publish right to that account. Same with some of the other social media platforms, FTP, Twitter, Vimeo, YouTube. I actually need to use more of this because it's a very powerful tool. It makes it much easier to post. So if you're in here and you've kind of played around with some of the different settings and you've decided that you're going to change some of these settings around, and you're going to notice up here that it now says custom for preset. And this is when you can go in and you can say, I want to save this preset, or you want to import a preset. So you can save a preset, and you can do that by just naming it test preset or whatever you're going to call it. If you've added effects, you can save those here as well. If you've added publishing settings, you can save those as well. And then just click OK. And there it is, it's the test preset, and it's going to load up in the top part of the presets here. And you can access this at any time, and it's an easy to use preset system. So those are the options. I am going to tell you that I've done a lot of testing, rendering between straight up After Effects or straight out of Media Encoder. And overall, it's much quicker, it seems to be, to render straight out of After Effects by quite a bit. Just depending on the project file. Sometimes it's 10 to 20% faster to render out After Effects. Sometimes it's 50% or more faster to render straight out After Effects. Now, the advantage of going straight to Media Encoder and why I will use it is because I have set up presets for social media platforms or motion science in general, presets I have made to publish to that platform. And for me to render directly out of After Effects isn't possible to do that. So for instance, when I post on Instagram right now, I actually use this HEVC H265 format to post to Instagram. When I post things to the platform for motion science, I use a codec I've created called New Kajabi, because that's the platform I use. So it just depends. If I was to render straight out of After Effects for a social media platform, I would then have to bring that file into Media Encoder and render it here inside of Media Encoder. And that is, to me, more time consuming than putting an extra 20% time into rendering directly to Media Encoder and it spitting out one file versus an uncompressed file and then a compressed file. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So something else that's really cool about Media Encoder is like I can duplicate this setup. So if I want to render out an H.264 at a match source high bit rate, and I also want to render out a HEVC file match source, I also want to duplicate it again, which I can hit Command D on the keyboard, or I could duplicate here. I could render out, let's say, a QuickTime here, and I want it to be ProRes 422HQ, but I also want it to not have audio. And what I can do now is I can hit start, and it's going to start just encoding this first file. As soon as this one's done, it's going to move into the next file, and so on and so forth. And it just moves down the list. As I add renders to this, it'll just pick up where it's at and just continue rendering. So it's pretty powerful in that sense. Okay, so something else that's very powerful about Media Encoder is something called watch folders. And what are watch folders? They're really awesome. You click on this little tab right here to pull it up. If you don't see it, you need to make sure that you have watch folders enabled here on the window. And once you have it, all you do is go over here to the plus sign and click add. And you're going to go to your folder that's called the watch folder. Mine's called a render folder. There it is. All you have to do is select that folder. And then once you have this folder selected, you're going to set up a preset that how you want items within this folder to render. So I want them to render H.264. I want them to match source high bit rate. And all that means is that the bit rate is going to be very high. It's going to use a software encoder, VBR1 pass. I could change any of this if I wanted to increase things here. I could set it all up. If I want it to be 2 pass, sure, maybe we'll do that instead. You can make all the changes just like you do in the normal Media Encoder. You're going to make all those changes here. You're going to set it up. And what happens now is anytime something is dropped into this watch folder, it's going to automatically start rendering. I'm on a Mac here and I've got my render folder pulled up, and here's the folder. And there's nothing inside these folders yet, but this is the folder I told Media Encoder to watch as my render folder. And this folder could be called anything you want to call it. I just call it render folder. So for this instance, I want to take another render I have, which is a QuickTime movie right here. And this is just people on stage from a concert, and it's 120 megabytes. It's a QuickTime movie. I want it to be rendered in my H.264. So all I have to do is drop this over here inside of my folder and watch what happens here in Media Encoder. Without me doing anything, it's going to automatically pick up on that and start rendering. Pretty cool stuff. So again, I could take this renderer, I could take this render, and I'm just dropping those in there. And same thing, they're going to immediately start rendering here inside the watch folder. There they go. So now they're rendering. It's going to see 2 different files. So now a second one is going to pop up and start rendering as well as soon as this one finishes. And they're being rendered to H.264s. If at any time I want to change this, it's really easy to do. I'll just go back up here and change that preset. So now it's rendering the second one. As soon as it renders them, you'll notice that it moves it out of here. So this one's going to finish. It's going to move out. Now it's gone. And it moves it into a source folder here. So here are my footage pieces that were dropped in, put nicely away in here. And here's my output. And these are all my H.264s. They're ready to go for whatever I need to use them for. So want to show you one other very powerful feature of this watch folder. And that is the ability to render After Effects project files as well. But how does this work? So here's the project file I was working on. It's called Advanced Rendering. It's the name of the lesson. And here is that project file right here. Okay. So all I have to do is take this project file into the render folder. Just like a QuickTime was dropped in here, all I have to do is drop this project file in here. So what I'd like to do is actually Alt-Option click and drag, and it makes a copy, and boom, there it is inside, and it's ready to render. But what you're going to notice is that nothing actually renders here in my Media Encoder. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because any composition that you want to render from your After Effects project file has to be in the root file structure of the project window. So you can see the comps are all inside of a folder here. And it's kind of a safety net. So that means that if I want to only render this comp, it needs to be out here by itself. If I want to render both of these comps, then they need to both be outside of here. And it's going to render both of these comps. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this project file. And we're going to go back here. And the project file has updated itself. So I'm just going to take it and copy. And it's going to say, do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. And you're going to see right here on the Media Encoder, it's going to pop up here in just a second when it sees that project file, and it's going to start rendering the compositions, and there it goes. So it's going to render the first composition, which is probably, it's going to go day for night. So it's going in alphabetical order. And then as soon as day for night has rendered, it's going to render the proxy. Okay, so both compositions were rendered, and you can see here in source, it's got the project put in there, and then it's got the proxy and the day for night. So day for night, this is that composition, and proxy that's that composition. Both rendered, super powerful. So anytime you drop a render, a QuickTime, or a After Effects project file into this render folder, it's going to just, as long as Media Encoder is open, it's going to see that and it's going to start rendering it. So that's what I've got for you for Advanced Rendering Media Encoder. Hope you learned something new.